Before we get started tonight, I'd like to take just a few moments to recognize some special guests that we have with us here today. Kelly Paul, the wife of Senator Rand Paul, and their son Robert. Reagan Foundation trustee and the former governor and former U.S. Senator from the state of California, Pete Wilson, and his wife Gail. Our former Congressman, Elton Gallegly, and his wife Janice. California State Assemblyman Scott Wilk and his wife Vanessa. We have a number of Ventura County and Simi Valley elected officials here with us today. Thank you all for coming. And of course, the director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, Duke Blackwood. When Ronald Reagan made a run for the presidency in 1980, he had before him a difficult but doable task, one not unlike any other figure aspiring to national office. His goal was to clearly lay out his conservative philosophy and communicate it well so that he could build an effective national coalition, one large enough to win. While it was true in President Reagan's time that economic conservatives, those who wanted lower federal spending and less taxes, did not have a lot in common with social conservatives, or those in favor of school prayer, or who were pro-life, there was a particular glue that held these two opposite wings of the party together. It was anti-communism, the grist of the foreign policy conservatives. It linked the three groups together as one. Whether one considered themselves a Republican or a Democrat, if you fell into one of these three camps, you were predisposed to vote for Ronald Reagan as he represented them all. Well, they did vote for him, and the rest is history. Now, why would I want to recite such important but ancient history in introducing our special guest this evening? I do so because I believe that while we have President Reagan to thank for his remarkable role in bringing an end to communism, we also have an enormous challenge ahead of us. How do we, in an age where communism now sits on the ash heap of history, unite in order to build a winning coalition to take the national stage again? You might recall when the battle was Reagan versus Mondale. The question Ronald Reagan aptly handled was, where's the beef? Now, the question we all must ask ourselves as a party is, where's the glue? I believe that our guest tonight, Senator Rand Paul, spends a lot of time thinking about this problem. Some here might well know him as the son of Congressman Ron Paul, the popular longtime champion of libertarian causes. Some undoubtedly found out about him when he, relatively early during his first term in the U.S. Senate, conducted the 9th longest filibuster on record. But for those who have carefully observed this newfound talent in the Senate, Senator Paul's huge success in making waves on the national scene comes as no real surprise. His rock-solid positions on fiscal responsibility, smaller government, and a balanced budget, combined with his conservative stances on social causes, have positioned him well to do what? Some say he may run for the presidency in 2016. We'll see, only he has the answer to that. But run or not, what the Republican Party has to be grateful for is Senator Paul's echo of Ronald Reagan's view, that in order to win again on the national stage, we must reach out and build a bigger tent. In order to make this point, Senator Paul has staked out some positions, and I'm sure will continue to do so in the future. They'll spark some imaginations and maybe even stir some controversy. Not a bad thing, I would say. There were plenty around in 1980 who criticized Ronald Reagan for doing the same thing, and look what happened. Our nation benefited for many years and still does. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I want to apologize in advance for having a little bit of raspy voice. I've been doing a lot of talking. But I hope you got a comfortable seat, because once I get going, I can go on for a while. And for the wiseacres who've been coming up to me and saying, "Well, I thought you'd wear that red suit tonight." That was not red suit that I had on with Ronald Reagan. That was rust-colored, three-piece, and it was a corduroy suit. You don't see those very often anymore. Oh, and thank you for coming out. Thank you for having me here. This is a real honor to let me speak here at the Reagan Library. You know, the other night, Jay Leno said, he was talking about the president's new acting IRS commissioner. Well, the reason they call him an acting commissioner is because he has to act like the scandal doesn't have anything to do with the White House. You know, I hardly know where to start. It's kind of like old MacDonald's farm of scandals. Here a scandal, there a scandal, everywhere a scandal. But you don't have to fear. The president has now asked Eric Holder to investigate Eric Holder. That can only work out well. You know, one example of how bad these scandals have become is the story of Catherine Engelbrecht. She's a concerned citizen from Richmond, Texas, near Houston. That's where I grew up. She and her husband have a small manufacturing business. In the past few years, she became interested in public policy and founded a Tea Party group, the King Street Patriots. Now, her group wanted to do something really outrageous. They wanted to get dead people off of the rolls. They didn't want to let dead people vote anymore. I mean, it seems pretty reasonable. But Big Brother had other ideas. So she has this group. First thing that happens, the FBI comes to interrogate her. Now, you would think the FBI would be interested in getting dead people off the rolls and no longer letting them collect welfare. You know that happens. Over $600 million was dispensed to dead people. One guy collected his dad's insurance from 1971 to 2008. You know how they caught him? He died. So Catherine Engelbrecht, the FBI goes on, they're investigating, they come time after time to interrogate her. Then the IRS comes. And then the FBI comes again. They want to ask her about her Patriot group, her Tea Party group. Then she's audited. Her personal taxes are audited. Then her business is audited. Then the FBI comes back and asks more questions about why she's trying to remove dead people from the rolls. So they return 3 more times, and then the IRS comes again. Then the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco comes. Then OSHA comes. And if you remember Reagan's speeches about OSHA, it's no fun having OSHA come. I'm not making this up. This woman was put through hell. Tell her that the power to tax is not the power to destroy. Imagine how this poor woman's life has been upended. Anybody that's ever been audited can imagine. Imagine what she's been through for the past 2 years. And then realize that she may have been targeted simply because of her political beliefs. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. There's something profoundly un-American about using the brute force of government to bully someone. And I'm dead serious when I say if the president doesn't hold someone accountable, I think he will have lost the moral authority to govern effectively. So I'm all for giving the president another chance. So today I'd like to ask the president, Mr. President, step forward, show some leadership, take command of the situation, and fire and prosecute anyone who used government power to punish political opponents. And I think the government's out of control in so many ways. And I remember Ronald Reagan speaking about this when I attended the 1976 convention when I had that great rust-colored suit on. I was 13 years old, but I remember him saying that the nearest thing to eternal life on this earth is government program. And to illustrate how hard it was to end a government job, he told the story of a British civil servant. This position was created in 1803, and the man was set atop the cliffs of Dover, and he was to ring a bell if he saw Napoleon coming. Now, the British did finally eliminate his position in 1947. As Reagan said, big government is the problem, not the solution. The president now, our current president, says the people who quote Reagan and talk of government tyranny, we need to just get over it. But you know what? I tend to still side with Thomas Paine, who said those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigues of supporting it. Whether it be indefinite detention of Americans or droning them, it's not too much defensive liberty that we have, but rather too little. Sometimes conservatives, though, get tagged as being against all government. You go on Jon Stewart or one of these shows and they say, oh, you're from the Tea Party, you don't believe in any government. And so I'll often tell people, I actually believe in $2.6 trillion worth. Let's just spend what comes in. Now, some of you may remember the San Bruno explosion. It killed 8 people. It's been 4 or 5 years now. It was a terrible tragedy. And 2 senators from California, who I think will leave unnamed, tried to rush through pipeline regulations. They want to do something, make everybody feel good. But I saw them and I held them up. And the media insinuated that I was somehow an uncaring Republican. But the exact opposite is true. I insisted on having regulations that would prevent another explosion. The whole episode was a classic example of what's wrong with big government. Janet Krieg and her 13-year-old daughter Janessa died tragically with 6 other Californians. Their lives deserve more than just feel-good legislation. We should try to fix the problem. This tragedy occurred before I was elected, but one Thursday night they said, oh, let's pass it by unanimous consent. Everybody's getting on a plane, and this is what they do. They just rush through legislation. Nobody reads it. So in their haste to do this, in Congress's usual haste to be involved with this, they rushed through this legislation. The Democrats were trying to fast track this with nobody reading it. So I said no, and they gave me grief. But I said, I was elected, I said I wanted to read the bills. The bills in Washington are rarely read. They're passed without debate, and this bothers me. I made a pledge to have the bills read. I just think it's not too much to ask, so I held the bill. The press was merciless. They called me an obstructionist. They said I didn't care about these people. I didn't care about the tragedy. But the opposite's true. I said, if we're going to do something, let's fix it. So we read the bill, and lo and behold, as we read the bill, we found out that it did. We wanted to know, does it place undue burdens on the economy? Will it fix the actual problems? So we read the bill and we were shocked. We found out that the National Safety Transportation Board hadn't even released the report on this. They'd been working a year on it and hadn't been released. So the bill was intended to fix a problem, but they hadn't even read what had happened. So I insisted we read the accident report. When we did, we discovered something even more incredible. The new regulations that they wanted to rush through and make everybody feel good would exempt the older pipelines. San Bruno is a 50-year-old pipeline. So the San Bruno line pumps, the San Bruno line that exploded would still be exempt from this. The bill would have fixed nothing. So we read further and we discovered that a pipeline just like this had exploded in my state in Kentucky in 1985, and lo and behold, the report said the same thing. You're grandfathering in the old pipelines. You're not doing anything to improve the safety of the old pipelines. So the new regulations would have to, if they want to fix it, get rid of the grandfather clause that allows older pipelines to avoid the safety testing. So at my insistence, they added this in, an amendment to get rid of the grandfather testing, and an improved bill was passed. Within weeks, further testing on the San Bruno line found another area of weakness and potentially saved lives in the process. By delaying the bill and reading the bill and doing the job that supposedly you elect your representatives to do, we are able to improve this law and save lives. Do you think it's too much to ask that they at least read the bills before we pass them? You know, I say do it right or just don't do it at all. I've introduced a bill that requires that we wait 1 day for every 20 pages of legislation. So Obamacare, that would take them a while, wouldn't it? Now, the media often depicts conservatives as not caring about the environment or safety either, but nothing could be farther from the truth. I'm a libertarian, conservative, Republican, a lot of different labels, who spends most of my free time outdoors. I bike, I hike, I kayak, I compost. I plant trees. In fact, I have a giant sequoia from California I'm trying to grow in Kentucky. I haven't had much luck yet, but I'm still trying. Republicans care just as deeply about the environment as Democrats, but we also care about jobs. We want common sense regulations that balance economic growth, jobs, and safety. But if we want to win in bluish, getting bluer states like California, we have to change the current perceptions of who we are. Last year I read Barbara Kingsolver's book, Animal Vegetable Miracle, about growing and harvesting one's own food and buying locally. She writes that each food item in a typical U.S. meal travels an average of 1,500 miles, and if every U.S. citizen ate just one meal that was grown locally, we could reduce our oil consumption by 1.1 million barrels of oil a week. My family and I, we do our part. We shop at the local farmers market. I won't lie to you, we also shop at the grocery store when we buy stuff from California and Mexico and other places, but we try to do our part and we care about trying to change things. Joel Salatin also writes about sustainable farming. He has a book called Folks, This Ain't Normal. And he says of government, he says they often pass regulations that impede small, sustainable farmers. So last year, my son Robert, who's here with me today, we went and visited his farm in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. He grass feeds his cows, chickens, hogs. He collects rainwater from the slopes of the mountains. Manure is his fertilizer. He avoids vaccines, antibiotics, and hormones. His farm is idyllic, and he trains interns on how to do sustainable farming. But he also sees the government as a troublesome meddler in the life of the small farmer. Like many libertarians, he sees government regulations written to benefit large corporate farmers, but nearly impossible for a small farmer to follow. I hear the same stories across America from small banks, small medical practices, small retailers. The rules and regulations are so complex and cumbersome that often big business becomes an accessory. They don't mind it. They've got compliance officers, but the little guy can't afford it. It's become Byzantine, and it confounds the small business person. When we as Republicans wake up and tell voters, you know what, we want to be the champion of the small farmer, of the small businessman or woman, then we'll thrive again as a party. To win in California again, Republicans should side with voters that, frankly, want to throw the bums out. I've been to Washington, and believe me, there's no monopoly on knowledge there. We need more citizen legislators. Congress has a 10% approval rating, and some say that's higher than they deserve. So I say term limits for all of them. And I include myself in that. You'll lose some people you think are good, but you get rid of a lot of people who become infected with power. And I think a better turnover would really help the country. I think to win in California, we need to tell people we're the party that wants to do nation building at home, not always overseas. Just last week, a bridge collapsed in Washington state. The president insists we don't have money to run the self-guided tours at the White House. But the same week he announces that, and the same week we're looking for money to repair our bridges, he sends $250 million more to Egypt. This is on top of the $2 billion they get every year. We wonder, and they still hate us over there. The reason they hate us is we gave that money to Mubarak. We didn't give it to the people. Why did the people burn an American flag over there? Because they didn't like Mubarak, and they just saw us funneling money into a guy that could indefinitely detain them and had martial law for 40 years. So instead of borrowing billions of dollars from China to send it to Egypt, why don't we keep it at home? Let's spend it on some infrastructure here. And you know, if you really want to get mad, look at these mobs of people burning our flag. I would say not one penny more to any country that's burning our flag. Now, I will be frank with you. Some have said, give it up. Some say Republicans can never, ever win in California anymore. Now, to my mind, I say, I've met a lot of you. You don't seem that different. Now, maybe I haven't met some of the other ones, but I still think, though, that a majority of Californians are like the rest of us, like a majority of Americans, and they know that we can't continue to run trillion-dollar deficits. We're borrowing $20,000 a second, and it hurts all Americans. California is no exception. I don't think we need to dilute our message of low taxes, less regulation, and balanced budgets to win in California. You know, California's current corporate tax is 8.8%. Companies are fleeing to Texas and Nevada. In fact, I've heard the Texas governor is actually advertising to try to get your companies to leave. Boo. But actually, the boo should be for your government that is causing your companies to leave. Overregulation makes California less competitive, particularly in the oil market. And this is extraordinary. The Wall Street Journal reported recently that oil output in California is down 21% in the last decade. And it isn't because there's not enough oil. The Department of Energy estimates that California has double the amount of oil that North Dakota has. And yet North Dakota surpassed California last year in oil production. Why is North Dakota kicking California's butt? Because in California, you're not allowed to do any fracking, which is a technique that they're using, and really there's an explosion of jobs in North Dakota. So while California languishes, economies in states like North Dakota and Texas are booming. If Republicans want to compete in California, we also need to reach out to the Latino community. Everywhere I go, I try to bring the message of welcome. My family immigrated here to the United States. Wasn't always easy. In fact, my family spoke German after World War I and after World War II. Wasn't very popular. My great-grandfather peddled vegetables. They were poor. They had nothing. They began trucking the vegetables. They eventually distributed milk. But they were never rich. He eventually owned 5 acres, and he passed that down to his 5 kids. But their kids went to college. So there is an immigrant dream that's out there, and we need to be cognizant of that and not look to everybody who wants to come here and work as bad people. And this is an important change of attitude that until we have this change of attitude, I don't think we're going to win again, nationally or in California. Latinos will come to the GOP. Latinos will come to the GOP when we treat them with dignity, when we embrace immigrants as hard workers who are an asset to our country. Today, after 4 years of President Obama's policies, 1 in 6 Americans lives in poverty, more than at any time in the past several decades. So here's this president's going to help the poor has made the poor worse. The poor have become poorer under President Obama. Using taxes to punish the rich in reality punishes everyone. We are languishing. There's more people enrolling as disabled than there are getting jobs. High taxes and excessive regulation and massive debt are not working. The economy's not growing. Big government and debt are not a friend to the working poor. Debt shrinks the value of the dollar and pushes up prices. When the Joneses can't afford the high price of gas and have to skip their family vacation, they need to know that Democrat deficits are to blame. For the college kids that seem to want to vote for President Obama by droves, if you're struggling to get ahead and you have school loans and personal debt, you should choose a political party that wants to leave more money in the private sector so you'll get a job when you finish school. We need to get away from the perception that we only care about big business and rich people, though. I got into politics at the beginning of this Tea Party movement because I abhorred a government that took from the middle class to bail out the big rich banks. I hate the concept of legalized privilege. I hate the concept that they're going to take from you to give to somebody who bankrupted their bank, and that guy goes jolly along their way, making $100 million one year, goes bankrupt, makes $100 million the next year. We need to capitalize on what most people believe, but the Democrats are the ones orchestrating these bailouts, and we're opposed to these bailouts. And we need to talk about it. As a Republican, I fight each day to end welfare to big business, to end special breaks that only apply to the rich. When I hear that one of the richest men in the world was given a $500 million loan, taxpayer-financed loan, I'm horrified. How can this be happening? That was under President Obama, by the way. We will win in California, though, when we become the champions also of better education, of better public schools. The educational establishment has really given up on many blacks and Latinos. We can come into the rescue because they're not willing to change anything to make education better. If we are willing to come in and promote things like school choice and promote things that will change and give more local power to schools, we can be the people who rescue people from a tragic life where the schools don't serve them any good. The story of Jaime Escalante is telling. You remember him? There was a movie about him, East LA. He was an extraordinary math teacher. But when he came to East LA, his fellow teachers told him it would be impossible to teach calculus to a bunch of illiterate immigrants. But he refused to give up. He challenged his students like only an exceptional teacher can. And by the end of the year, something extraordinary happened. A large number of poor Latino students passed the AP test for calculus. It was so extraordinary they didn't believe it at first. They made the kids retake the test and they passed a second time. Latino students can thrive and they'll be better citizens if they get better education, and they can achieve with any students if we give them the opportunity. Now, Republicans like myself are open and excited about education reform, about school choice, about fixing what has become horribly broken. But the Democrats, by and large, resist any change. They're so beholden to that educational establishment that they don't want anything to change. They resist charter schools. They resist school choice. We make this a Republican issue. We take it to the large cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco that we're not winning, and we say, what is the other side doing for your kid's school? We're here to help you. We're here to make your schools better, and we'll win. Parents and teachers need to look to Republicans to fix the mess. Decisions about education should not or should be made at the local level, not in Washington. Over the next year, I'm going to be finding these kids and talking to them, asking these kids whether vouchers helped them, asking their parents whether it made a difference. Edna's an example. She was a fifth grader who couldn't even speak English. Through a voucher program, she attended a private school, Notre Dame Middle School in Milwaukee, went to a Catholic high school, attended Marquette, and eventually got a job, and now she's a patent engineer at a law firm. She was one of the first voucher students in the country. Her middle school principal said, Edna's a miracle, and we couldn't have done it without school choice. It's an issue that can resonate. We can win by taking this issue and saying, we are going to be the ones that make the schools better. Republicans will begin to gain African American support when we go into every community and fight for better schools. Republicans need to shout to anyone who will listen, more freedom, less government means more jobs, more wealth, and a better life for everyone. The American painter Robert Henry wrote to fellow painters, you should paint like a man coming over a hill singing. I like that. I love the picture of that. The Republican Party needs to proclaim like a man coming over a hill singing. The image that comes to my mind is the Von Trapp family. How many of the hills are alive? Actually, my wife told me never to sing, sorry. But you get that picture of optimism and of happiness, and it's sort of what Reagan exuded. I think of Reagan, who said that we should paint in bold colors, not pastels. Reagan never diluted what he had to say. He didn't say, well, maybe if you get time, maybe think about tearing that wall down. We need to be the party of passion. When I think of a man coming over the hill singing, I think of the passion of Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or give me death. We need to combine Patrick Henry, the passion of Patrick Henry, with the Proclaimers, who sang a song that says, I will walk 500 miles and I will walk 500 more, just to be the guy who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. That kind of passion, that kind of ardor, that kind of belief in something positive for the country, it's embodied by some of the people I've met recently. I recently met a Boston policeman who was there at the scene when the explosion happened. He passionately describes the desperation of the victims as he raced up and tried to apply tourniquets. He talked about his desire to see the bombers punished. But he also said what separates us from them is that when we finally did capture the one that we captured alive, we didn't drag him through the streets and beat him to death with tire irons. We didn't lynch him. There was a time in our country where if you were a black man and you were near a crime or even not near a crime, you were hung up by the nearest tree. It's exactly why the Bill of Rights and why due process and justice is so important, because there have been times when we get the wrong guy. Think of after the Olympic bombing. You remember the Olympic bombing? They had this young man, they said, oh, he did it. In the old days, maybe they would have lynched him. Turns out he didn't do it. It separates us from them. The whole filibuster was not about drones so much as it was about the Bill of Rights. That when you're accused of a crime, you get a trial. This is who we are. This is what we're about as a country. It sets America apart. It's what separates us from them. This guy I have no sympathy for. A guy who wants to kill women and children is not going to advance any kind of religious cause. He's not going to advance any kind of political cause. I want to see this bomber punished. But I also want to see it done our way. Have him stand trial with a lawyer, with a jury. We'll convict him for all the world to see, and we will punish him. It's an issue. The idea of justice is an issue that transcends party lines. That was one of the amazing things about the filibuster is we had people from right and left, young people by the tens of thousands, signing up for our Twitter, tweeting it out themselves. People were excited about somebody who passionately believed in something and wasn't just bashing the other party because they were from the other party. So these are things that I think can help us to grow our party. If we are Republicans and as a party passionately defend the Bill of Rights, we don't need to dilute what we believe in. We need to just convince everyone, the haves and those who do not yet have, that our policies will provide the greatest good for the most people. If we want to win nationally again, we will need to reach out to a diverse nation. We need to welcome African Americans into our party, Asian Americans into our party, Latinos into our party. When the Republican Party looks like the rest of America, we'll win again. When we have people with tattoos and without tattoos in the party. People with short hair, people with hair in a ponytail, people in suits, people in blue jeans. We have to look like the rest of America. And we can if we passionately defend the principles of liberty. But above all else, we must believe in ourselves again, believe in our founding documents, believe in an economic system that has made America the beacon of the world. We will again see a thriving America when we do that. The GOP will dominate in California and nationally when we become the party that proclaims, like a man coming over a mountain singing. Thank you.
Senator, I think you found a few friends in California. The senator has agreed to take a few questions. I know many of you wrote them out on cards, and I have them here, so I will be reading them. I pondered while you were speaking about whether to argue whether you had a rust suit or a red suit on. I think it's red. However, with your reputation as a filibuster senator, I will not take that on. So our first question, what do you think is the best path for the Republican Party going forward in future elections? How would you prioritize between reaching out to different groups, Hispanics, women, etc., and solidifying conservative principles?
You know, I don't think it's about diluting the principles, but I think I've been pretty harsh about where we are. I've said we adapt, evolve, or die as a party because we have to be more inclusive. I'll give you an example, Ohio. Ohio's a battleground state, and we keep losing it. If you change from 5% of the African-American vote to 20%, which is what Nixon got and others have gotten, Governor Wilson may have gotten as high, Republicans used to get that. We have to try harder, though. We have to show up. So I'm showing up in places, Howard University, Simmons College, NAACP, School Choice, the Inner City, Frederick Douglass Foundation. We need to show up places, and I think that we can. It's the same with the Latino voter, same with the Asian American voter. We have to show up in venues. And sometimes when I ask people, it's like, what is the resistance? What is the resistance to a Republican? And they'll say, you never come to talk to us. They think we have to have a better relations. It's not a panacea. It's not going to overnight completely change. But really going from 5% of the African American vote to 20% changes Ohio to a Republican state and probably changes Illinois to a Republican state.
Thank you. So I know that you are a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. The question is, what do you think is the top priority in terms of foreign affairs for the United States?
I think the top priority for the country constitutionally, historically, and appropriately is defense of the country. That's what we're supposed to do in Washington. That being said, Reagan's motto was peace through strength. It wasn't war through strength. There are some, sometimes in our party, who mistake war for defense. And if you don't believe in eternal and perpetual war, it doesn't mean you don't believe in a strong national defense. And this is an important distinction. There are some in our party who wanted to give arms to Gaddafi, and then a year later wanted to give money to rebels to overturn Gaddafi. There's a certain inconsistency. I'm very worried about getting involved in a new war in Syria. And people say, well, Assad is such a bad guy. He is. But on the other side, we have al-Qaeda and now Nusra. And then they say there are some pro-Western people, and they say, oh, we're going to vet them. Well, apparently we've got a senator over there who had a picture taken with some kidnappers, so I don't know how good a job we're going to do vetting those who are going to get the arms. So there's two ironies you have to overcome if you want to get involved in the war in Syria. The first irony is you will be allied with al-Qaeda. The second irony is most of the Christians are on the other side. So you may be arming Islamic rebels who may well be killing Christians. Does that make Assad a good person? No. I don't think there are any good people in this war. And there's some tragically innocent people who are going to be caught in the middle, but I just don't know that arming one side is going to make the tragedy any less. So I think we need to be careful and cautious.
So come home. What do you think is the top priority in this country?
I don't think I'd describe it as come home. What I would say is that we need to, as a country, decide when things are in our national interest. And historically, that was done, and constitutionally, by Congress. A declaration of war was a very important thing that we did, and we would declare war. And I have no problem having that debate, and if we need to go to war in Syria, let's have the debate, everybody vote on it, and let's decide whether we really need to be at war in Syria. But I don't think we should willy-nilly slip into there, and then all of a sudden some of our GIs are killed, and then we say we have to send more in, and we gradually get into a bigger situation. But we have to defend the country, and so that means there are times. So for example, when we were attacked on 9/11, absolutely we can't let anybody attack our country. And so going into Afghanistan was absolutely the right thing. Getting bin Laden, absolutely the right thing. So there are times, but we have to decide when those times are appropriate. We need to have a national debate over what is in our national security interest and what isn't. And to me, sometimes we're too loose with that. We just sort of say, oh yes, it's national security interest to be in Syria. Well, to me, it takes a little more of a debate to convince me that that's a good thing to do.
I know you have 3 sons, teenagers. We have teenagers in the audience, high school kids, even college kids. I wonder what you would say your top priority is for that generation.
I think young people have a keener sense of the ideas of justice, what's right and wrong. To tell you the truth, I think young people have a keener sense than older people. I think we get jaded over a lifetime. I think young people are also very cynical of politicians in general. They get their news from YouTube and comedians as opposed to most of the news channels, and they frankly don't believe politicians much at all. So, to appeal to them, we need more genuine politicians, people in office who really speak their mind honestly and aren't pandering to audiences. And I think they want to see things done that will make it where when they get out of college, they get a job. And I think most of them are seeing sort of despairing in a way that they're getting out of jobs, getting out of school with large loans, and the prospects aren't that good. So I think we can get the youth vote back again. I don't know if it means we're going to have a candidate who can sing Al Green or what it's going to take, but in that case, I think I've been excluded. So.
Well, one of our questions actually is a follow-up. How will you attract younger voters to your campaign?
Some of it I'm not sure you can put a finger on, although I think being honest and being genuine and not pandering helps. But I think that, for example, we got maybe one of the largest responses ever. I think the people on C-SPAN said that it's the largest audience they've ever had was during the filibuster. But if you'd have taken this issue and polled it beforehand and said, how interested is the American public in drones? Not very. But as we began to talk about the Bill of Rights and the ideas of that if you're accused of something, or if you're an Arab American and your cousin lives in Lebanon and you send emails to him and the government now says he's a terrorist, are you associated with terrorism? Should you get your day in court? Should you get a trial? Should we send American citizens to Guantanamo Bay from America without a trial? These are the kind of things that resonate with young people, and they really see the injustice of the idea that an American could be sent away without trial.
We have someone who wrote, I just want to thank you for your 100% that you earned for the Club for Growth scorecard. How can you and we promote job creation?
Well, you know, the Club for Growth, one of the things they talk about is trade, and I think trade has been good for us. And, you know, they say the average person, because of all these new products that come in through discount stores, Walmart and other stores like that, saves about $900 a year that you can spend on other things. Now, some people say, oh, trade's terrible, and it's ruined our country, and there's no middle class. There's some interesting statistics. There's a guy named Don Boudreaux, who's an economist from George Mason. What he does is he goes decade through decade, and he says, how many hours of work does it take to get a washing machine, a refrigerator, a dishwasher, TV, normal appliances in your house? And it's a lot less hours. It may be 1/10 of the hours it took in the 1950s. And everybody said, oh, the 1950s was perfect. You know, people look back nostalgically at times, but really free trade has allowed us to spend a lot less time getting the things we want. And even though we do have problems, and I know people struggle in our country and don't have jobs and are hungry, at the same time, you know, our poor are richer than the middle class in many countries. And so a lot of that, I think, is from free trade.
So we know that you're a young senator, a new senator. The question is, what was your biggest surprise when you got to the Senate?
I would probably say not yet old senator would probably be a better description. But no, I still am young at heart. But no, I think one of the things is that sometimes people say, you could never run for office. You've never held office. You're just a doctor in a small town doing eye surgery. And they did. They told me that all the time. But I don't think it takes someone who's been in office a long time to go up there and participate. And probably the biggest surprise I had was I got there, we were aggressive, we had a great staff, and we went after it, and we wrote our own budget. Balances in 5 years, by the way. And we got right in the middle of the debate. So I was kind of surprised that you didn't have to wait 20 years to be involved in the debate if you were eager, stood up, believed in things. And I think also that there's some grudging respect really from the other side on some of these issues, particularly when they involve the Bill of Rights and the ideas of justice. You know, even Harry Reid was nice to me after the filibuster.
So a follow-up question that somebody asked was, when you did your filibuster, did you come prepared with stacks and stacks of reading material, or did that all come
The biggest mistake I
spontaneously?
made is I really didn't plan ahead, and I had terrible shoes on. My feet hurt for 2 weeks afterwards. You know, it was not completely unplanned, but it was not completely planned either. We had said, well, if this issue comes up, I want to speak about it. I want to really say my piece on drones. So I had a couple files full of information. But I came there, you don't ever know. Because the Democrats, whoever controls the Senate, controls the floor. Usually there's a piece of legislation sort of guarding the floor. You can't bring up anything or just keep talking. There's usually a consent agreement that says you can speak for an hour, but at the end of the hour, boom, they gavel you and you're done. So you can't always stand up and filibuster. This particular day, I went up front and they wanted to know if I would agree to a consent agreement. And I said, well, and this might not have been completely honest. I said, well, I just have a few things I need to say first. And but it's also one of those things you can't announce in advance and say, oh, I'm going to do this for 13 hours. You don't know how long until you will have to take care of nature's call. And the people who did them longer than me actually were cheating some. This was in the days before TV, and they say Strom Thurmond was cheating by going into the cloakroom. That's at least the story I've heard. But I didn't really know exactly how long I would go with it. And I think one thing that made the filibuster a little different than others is some had read the phone book and the Constitution. I tried to keep it on message the whole time. I think I repeated myself a few thousand times, but I tried to talk about the issue.
So we have somebody that would like to know if you've been invited to the White House, and if so, can you tell us what the occasion was, and how did you find the president to be?
Actually, I like the president. I don't like his policies much. I don't like his politics, but I do like him. And, you know, I've been to the White House for social occasions. They have a Christmas party where everybody gets invited. I haven't had a special dinner or anything like that. I'm not sure if that's in the offing or not, but I did get to ride. You know, we walked through Air Force One here a few minutes ago, and I did get to ride. I think I may be the only Republican to ride with him on Air Force One. He doesn't have a lot of Republicans on the plane, but he was nice. He came back and spoke with me, and the reason I rode with him because I said, I've got some ideas for how we could fund bridges. Like one big idea that we should pass tomorrow, and I talked about this last week with Apple, let companies bring back that money at 5% and put it into a bridge repair fund.
For our last question, since you're being honest.
Only so far.
I won't ask you if you've made a decision about 2016, but I will ask you what it would take.
I got to get permission of the boss who's sitting in the first row there. I haven't been shy about saying I'm interested. I'm also interested in making the party bigger. So some of being interested allows you to get to a great stage like this and influence the debate, influence what people in the party think about how we grow the party bigger. And I think that needs to go on for a year or two. And that's typically the way things go. And so most people don't make a decision until probably after 2014 or elections or so. I'm considering it. There's a lot of family decisions in it. I mean, it's a lot of work just to run for the Senate and run for governor. It's an enormous amount of strain and work. Listen to my voice. I don't know if I can do this every day. But I do think that, for example, the Republican Party is losing the West Coast, all of it completely, every time now. We're losing all of New England every time. We can't win Illinois. So I think we do need people talking about how the party has to change to become a bigger, more inclusive party. And I think some of the libertarian twist is that there are some people in California who don't completely agree on all the cultural issues. I am socially conservative. I'm not going to change that. But I think the party can be big enough to allow people who don't all agree on every issue. It's not going to change who I am or what I talk about, but I think we can be a big enough party to include people that, I mean, it's like when you talk to your family, do you agree on every issue? You agree on a lot of issues, and the ones you don't give up on what you believe in, but you try to bring more people in who believe in limited government, lower taxes, less regulation, a restricted government restrained by the Constitution. That's some of it, but some of it I think is an outreach to people who, aren't white and from Northern Europe. We need other people, a lot of other people, to really be a national party again.
Thank you, Senator. It's been a privilege having you here. I know they've all enjoyed it as much as I have. I would like to ask if you would all please remain in your seats for just a few moments while we get our special guest out of the room, and then staff will help you get to dinner. Thank you all for coming. We hope to see you again soon.